The crisis between Saudi Arabia and Lebanon and the resignation of Prime Minister Saad Hariri appears to be largely about Yemen. In a long interview yesterday, Prime Minister Hariri indicated that Saudi Arabia is extremely concerned about the missiles that Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards have set up in Yemen, some of which have targeted Riyadh in recent weeks. Hariri proposed that he would come back to Lebanon, he would speak to President Michel Aoun, and he would urge President Aoun to use his influence with Hezbollah for Hezbollah to reverse its policy of engagement in Yemen. Hezbollah has been very vociferously engaged in Yemen. Sayyid Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has spoken in many speeches that the war in Yemen is one of the most important wars that Hezbollah is involved in currently. And the missile that targeted the Saudi capital Riyadh on November 4, according to most reports, including the US, was an Iranian missile which Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guards had something to do with getting it into Yemen and launching it from there. Saudi Arabia is very concerned that Iran and Hezbollah are building a missile network in Yemen to threaten Saudi Arabia from Yemen, similar to what Iran and Hezbollah have done over past decades, building missile systems in Lebanon to threaten Israel. So the scenarios facing Lebanon are several. The most positive one was, I suppose, what Prime Minister Hariri himself proposed, was a quid pro quo, that if Hezbollah abided by the government investiture statement, which said that all parties in Lebanon must not be involved in regional conflicts, and Hariri clearly indicated that he means in this case Yemen. He did not bring up Hezbollah's involvement in Syria. He did not bring up Hezbollah's own arms and missiles inside Lebanon. But the deal on the table seems to be, if Hezbollah pulls back from its engagement in Yemen, Hariri might be authorized, as it seems to be, to return as possibly prime minister, either in his current post or to form a new government, and return to some kind of coexistence. So that would be the most positive scenario in which Lebanon would avoid negative consequences. To my mind, I think Iran will not pull back from the opportunity to build Yemen as a base for leverage over Saudi Arabia. Its experience in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in their view, has been a very successful one, and I don't think they're going to forego the opportunity in Yemen to continue to build serious missile capacities to be able to threaten Saudi Arabia at will and have enormous leverage over the capital Riyadh, over various parts of Saudi Arabia. There's been many missile attacks in southern Saudi Arabia. The attack on Riyadh is a new level of threat. So unfortunately, I don't think Iran will pull back from its engagement in Iran. Whether it will find some sort of face-saving formula in which maybe Hezbollah announces that it will not be involved in Yemen while Iran and the Revolutionary Guards continue to do so, at least that might remove Lebanon from the crosshairs. If a deal is not struck, Saudi Arabia is likely to begin using economic leverage on Lebanon, and this is something Prime Minister Hariri and many in Lebanon have warned is a possibility. There are over 100, maybe around 160, 170,000 Lebanese that work in Saudi Arabia alone. Other couple of 100,000 work in other GCC countries. If Saudi Arabia were to implement anything like the blockade on Qatar, to do anything similar to that on Lebanon, the Lebanese economy would immediately go into a very drastic free fall. Lebanon has no capacity to withstand that. The currency would probably go into a free fall. The banks would be in crisis, real estate. It would be a very, very difficult economic and hence social situation as well. Saudi Arabia might be thinking that would put pressure on Hezbollah and their ally Michel Aoun and their other allies, as well as Iran, to adjust their policy. So that is maybe scenario 2. Scenario 3 is even more dire, and that would relate to what Israel might do. As many have indicated, Israel usually does not entertain or think about wars in the winter months, but possibly in the spring or summer. It's very clear that Israel is very uneasy about Iran and Hezbollah's deployments in Syria and their continued presence in Lebanon, and there's a lot of risk in that arena. Clearly, if Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries are not protective of Lebanon and are no longer providing that political cover, it might encourage Israel even further to do something, although that doesn't seem to be immediately in the offing. Finally, I would end with the U.S. position. The Secretary of State came out very quickly with a strong statement supporting Prime Minister Hariri and addressing him as Prime Minister, supporting the Lebanese state, supporting the Lebanese army, and calling them important partners in the war against terror. Not to forget that the U.S. and the Lebanese, with cooperation, the Lebanese army with cooperation from the U.S., just in August defeated ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the eastern Bekaa Valley, and that was a great success. Hezbollah had a hand in that as well. So clearly from the Department of Defense and the Department of State, there isn't much sort of sympathy with the Saudi position. But as we saw in the crisis with Qatar, it might be that President Trump might end up on a different page. The president did tweet his support for the domestic developments in Saudi Arabia over that same weekend when Prime Minister Hariri resigned. He did not mention the Lebanese situation, but it's not clear whether Secretary Tillerson speaks for the president on this issue.